And now joining me here to discuss the situation along the front lines and, of course, in the town of Volodar is Gary Tabak, former chief of staff at the NATO military liaison mission in Moscow. Hello, Gary, and thank you very much for joining us on Ukraine this week.
Hello, Don. It's always great to be on TVP.
Now, looking at the situation near Volodar, I was actually there about a year and a half ago for the Battle of Volodar, what some people were then describing as the biggest tank battle since World War II. And the situation was very much in favor of the Ukrainians. If you're familiar with the situation there, how the town is located, it's on the high ground. It controls the commanding heights to the south, right? So it gives the Ukrainians a huge military advantage, especially when mechanized attacks and waves are coming from the south and from the Russian side. So what is the situation currently like there that we're seeing, and has Ukraine taken a little bit of its forces off the line there, and is that causing a problem?
Well, I mean, Ukrainians are getting exhausted, and as you're right. I remember when you were there, and I was watching your report. I remember very clearly when our Bradley got hit by the Russian missiles twice, and the crew were able to escape. It just showed how great our armored personnel carriers and are. The Bradleys, and but the thing is that the Ukrainians have been dug in there for such a long time, and it has become a war of attrition. So Russians keep sending troops, and they're using glided bombs that are 3-5 tons, I hear now. So it is very hard to withstand that, considering that Ukrainians lack enough of anti-aircraft artillery and missiles. And the Ukrainians are getting exhausted. So how long can you continue and fight? This is a World War I type of fighting going on. But Ukrainians realize the importance of that town. I know in the West we don't talk about it as much as Mariupol and other towns or Bakhmut. But this is just as important, maybe even more important, because Ukrainian troops may end up encircled in it. And get caught in that terrible situation. But again, this is going on for a very long time. So you can't help but to realize that Ukrainians are outnumbered, simply outnumbered. And how much longer will they be able to withstand that without Western help, without Western weaponry? Apparently today, United States, the White House announced that we will provide more weapons and release the $6 billion that have been approved by Congress for a long time. So let's keep our fingers crossed that this time the promise will come true. But again, without a Western help, without us getting engaged in this, Ukrainians will not be able to hold on for too long.
Well, and looking at this week, I mean, I think we went into this week very optimistic, very hopeful that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky would travel there to New York and to the United States and garner mass support for his four-point victory plan. But here we are sitting today. And it's not looking so good now, is it? We do have this almost $8 billion support package from the United States. This is going to allow Ukraine to kind of stay in the fight till the end of the year, giving them some more Patriot missiles and battery and extra battery. But we're still short as far as political will is concerned. And it looks like actually political will is not on Ukraine's side at the moment. What is Ukraine going to have to look at doing over the next couple months? Because obviously President Zelensky wasn't able to convince his Western allies.
You're absolutely done. Very unfortunate. Everybody were expecting it. But again, Ukraine somehow, again, I'm not a politician, but Ukraine somehow became a hostage of our United States politics. And it's taken hostage. And unfortunately, it is the current administration. Again, yes, they have promised the Patriot missiles, and they promised the long-range missiles, and they've promised that $6 billion or $9 billion. I'm already confused how many billions here and there that's going on. But again, those promises have been made before, but the deliveries have not been made. So hopefully, maybe with some international pressure, with some pressure before the elections in the United States, it will be delivered. I mean, that's the only hope that we have for now, and then wait and see how our elections will turn out. Again, a lot of it depends on that. So hopefully Ukrainians will be able to hold on a little longer. But again, if that will remain the way it is now, that war by attrition, Ukrainians will not be able to hold on to it, because they're just the force against them is just much greater. And it's not just the weaponry, it's the sanctions, it's the political pressure, it's the informational war, it's the diplomatic war that's supposed to be going on. Or somehow the Western countries and NATO is not able to collect itself together, as we have done in World War II, and assist to defeat that evil that is infecting, that is killing so many of people who are trying to defend their land.
Well, I think we can talk about the political will and the lack thereof. Despite what the political rhetoric is, it's a very different situation in reality. Obviously, these politicians aren't walking the walk. They're talking the talk, but not walking the walk. And I think we can talk about this till we're blue in the face. But Gary, I'm going to ask you a very difficult question, and that is Ukraine's decision to shift its forces and go into the Kursk region. This has been successful by many measures, but I think there's consensus that a lot of what it was meant to do was to draw forces away from other places on the front lines in eastern Ukraine, especially around the Pokrovsk area. Who knows? Maybe even the situation in the Kharkiv region along the border. If we look at deep state maps, we don't see any territorial changes there. We don't see a push forward by the Ukrainians. In fact, we see the exact opposite, and we see the Ukrainians losing ground all the way up north from Kupiansk all the way down to Volodar. So the difficult question, Gary, is this working out for Ukraine occupying the Kursk region and using its forces there?
It is a difficult question. Again, I think it is a political question. I think that they have only so much of military resources that they have to spread around on a huge front. Front is almost as large as it was during World War II. So, but Ukrainians simply do not have enough of equipment and enough of people and trained people to do so, especially after such a long entrenched war. And this war is changing. It's changing from World War I type of it, trenches war and armor war, to a drone war. So now whoever has more drones, whoever has more anti-aircraft weapons, those are the ones that have the ability to fight this war in a more modern way. But again, the Kursk region, I think this is a question to politicians and diplomats, but in my humble opinion, I think it is very important, because if there are going to be negotiations, this is the ace in the deck, in the hand, that the Ukrainians have. Because prior to that, Putin kept insisting that let's have negotiations, let's stop at the front line, and this is where a ceasefire is going to happen, kind of a 38th parallel in Korea. But now he's not willing to do it, because the front moved inside of Russia, and so now the front line is inside of Russia. So this is some sort of a negotiation point that the Ukrainians may trying to hold on to at the in a very expensive way, in lives and equipment. But again, expecting for Ukrainians to push forward is I think unreasonable, because they have nothing to push forward with. They don't have enough men, and they do not have enough equipment to do so. They do not have air cover, or not even mentioning air superiority, in a way to conduct an offensive operation.
And there's still the lack of the decision by the West to allow Ukraine to strike targets further into Russia.
Yeah,
so what does
absolutely.
Ukraine do right now? I mean, obviously they can't count on the West, so do they need to expedite their own, what we've seen, these hybrid drone rocket systems that have quite a decent range on them, and it looks like Ukraine's actually even used them a few times. Maybe this is where the Ukrainian defense industry needs to go and ramp up its own production of those specific types of weapons to hit long-range targets.
Don, you're absolutely correct, 100%. The thing is that we keep promising that we're going to deliver this and that and this and that, but when Ukrainians ask, well, can we use it deep inside of a Russian territory? We say, no, you can't use it deep inside of Russian territory. Not that. You can fight, but not on the Russian territory, which is ridiculous. You can't fight a war like that. So what is for Ukrainians to do in these situations? It is another difficult question for me to answer. But I think we have precedents. We have a precedent in Israel. So Israelis also cannot fight. They don't have a fair fight. They can't, collateral damage. If they cause collateral damage, it's deadly. The world does. The world does not accept if Israelis will, God forbid, hurt some civilian that Hamas hiding among them and things like. They would blame Israel, not Hamas. So Israelis came up with the pagers. I mean, it's like from a movie. It's like from a Hollywood movie with the pagers and the walkie-talkies and things like that to fight the terrorists and to fight that much bigger force than what they are. Ukrainians are also doing it's almost like they're competing with each other. Ukrainians just were able to reach deep into the Russian territory and blow up their ammunition depots. How did they do that? That is, how did the Israelis do that with the pages? How did the Ukrainians do that with the depots? So it's not going to, it's a very, very asymmetrical warfare that they will have to conduct. They have to be very creative in fighting this war. And Ukrainians, I think, doing a very, very job coming up with that creativity. I mean, look, they blew up huge munition depots that have been seen from a satellite. Yeah. It's like a nuclear, they saw the mushrooms. So that had to be precise. That had to be coordinated. That is a great job that the Ukrainians do. And probably they will have to continue to do it until the West will wake up and realize that, we need to support those countries that are holding, preventing us from World War III, trying to pay a huge price with it.
Yeah, CIA Director Burns said that actually the Kremlin is trying to make the West, impose its own red lines on itself by increasing their bellicose nuclear rhetoric as far as redrawing the new nuclear doctrine. And I think that that's probably a good trick in Moscow's sleeve that they are definitely using, and I'm worried about the impact that it'll have on the West. Do you think a lot of people in the United States are going to be fooled by this latest ploy that somehow Russia is going to attack the United States because it's supplying weapons to Ukraine, who then attack Russian territory?
Well, there are three things. One is that Ambassador Bolton, who used to be an advisor on national security to President Trump, said that the Russians are bluffing. And by the way, he's not a fan of President Trump, but just in case if anybody thinks that it's political, I think this guy is telling the truth. Two, the Russians have tried their Sarmat missile that is supposed to be the most threatening missile that they have now, that is on active service, the ballistic missile that will deliver a nuclear charge to the United States. But they have tried 6 tests, and all 6 tests have failed. And recently one blew up right inside of a silo, or right when it was deploying from a silo. Not clear on that. But meanwhile, it's a disaster. So whatever they're trying to threaten us with is not really working so far. But another point is that I think we, as the Western world, especially the United States, we cannot have some tyrant, some crazy dictator hold us hostage or blackmail us with a nuclear weapon. Because if we're going to give into it, then we might as well give up and say, okay, well, whoever has a nuclear weapon, we should just give up because God forbid they'll use it. We may have something anti-nuclear, just like Israelis Who knew that they had something with those pagers? Maybe we have something like that that will destroy, and maybe that's why their Sarmat, that best missile in the world, is not flying.
Yeah, well, I've seen some good memes with Budanov, questioning whether Russians use pagers, but that's an entirely different issue. At the same time, I think, China and India purportedly have said that if there's any nuclear exchange on Russia's behalf, then they will definitely not follow behind. So I think in most circles, they're discounting the use of nuclear weapons, and I don't think that that's something that we should fear. Well, Gary Tabak, former Chief of Staff, NATO Military Liaison Mission in Moscow, it's always a pleasure having you on, and thanks for joining us on Ukraine this week.
Thank you. Thank you very much.